The night I called the police on my brother, I was sitting on the kitchen floor in the dark, holding my mother's empty jewelry box, and I wasn't crying. I want you to understand what that means, the not crying part. Because I am a person who cries. I cried at a dog food commercial once. I'm not ashamed of it. I cried when my best friend got into her first choice college, even though I wasn't even the one who got in. Crying has never been a problem for me. But that night, sitting on the cold kitchen tile in a house that had once been the safest place I knew, holding a little wooden box with painted roses on the lid that my mother had owned since before I was born, a box that was supposed to hold her wedding ring and her mother's pearl earrings and the thin gold chain my father gave her on their 20th anniversary, holding all of that emptiness in my hands, I had nothing. No tears. Just a sound inside my chest that wasn't quite a sound, more like a frequency, like when a television is on in another room and you can't hear it, but you can feel it in your back teeth. I already knew it was him. I think some part of me had known for 3 hours, since Darius came home looking the way he always looked right before something went missing. That particular brand of calm that isn't calm at all. It's something wound so tight it's gone quiet. The way he moved through the kitchen without really looking at anything. The way he answered questions a half second too slowly, like the words had to travel somewhere and come back before he could use them. I already knew, and I still walked to my mother's room and opened her dresser drawer and lifted the lid of that box because I needed the specific pain of being right rather than the foggy agony of suspecting. The box was empty. I sat down on the floor and I thought, this is the last time. I'm going to tell you everything, every part of it in the order it happened without the cleaned up version. Before I do, if this is the first time you're hearing my voice, my name is Maya, and I make this channel for people who are living inside something that looks fine from the outside and is anything but. If that's you, please subscribe because I'm not going anywhere and neither is this conversation. And when you finish listening, whether you're in London or Los Angeles or sitting in your car in a parking lot because home doesn't feel safe right now, drop a comment and tell me where you're coming from. I read every single one. I need to know you're there. Okay, from the very beginning. My brother Darius is 6 years older than me, and growing up, that gap felt like a gift. He was the coolest person in my world without even trying. He had this laugh. I can't describe it accurately enough. This big, rolling, room-filling laugh that made complete strangers turn around and smile without knowing why they were doing it. He was the kind of person who made spaces feel larger just by being in them. He taught me to ride a bike in a church parking lot 2 blocks from our house, running beside me for so long his lungs were burning before he let go. And even then, he kept jogging after me, arms out, just in case. He saved the last of his Halloween candy, specifically the good stuff, the Reese's, the Snickers, and gave it to me every February when I'd long since eaten mine and was starting to feel the specific sadness of a candyless winter. He called me Little Bird from the time I was about 4, something about the way I used to tilt my head when I was listening to something. And even at 15, when nicknames felt like death, I secretly loved it more than almost anything. We grew up in a regular house in a regular suburb outside of Philadelphia. My parents, Carol and Dennis, were the kind of people who made the specific effort of being present. Sunday dinners were non-negotiable. Birthdays were a whole production. Arguments happened and were resolved, not buried. My father worked in logistics for a regional company. My mother was a dental hygienist at a practice she'd been at for almost 15 years. They weren't wealthy. I want to be precise about that because what comes later involves money, and I need you to understand the weight of it. They were comfortable in the way that means all the needs are met and some of the wants, but there isn't a cushion deep enough to absorb a real disaster. They were two people who had built something carefully, brick by brick, over 20+ years, and they were proud of it in a quiet way that didn't need an audience. Darius graduated high school and went to community college for a year before it didn't stick. That wasn't alarming at the time. Plenty of people in our neighborhood took longer, went sideways first, found their way eventually. He got a job at a warehouse loading and shipping freight, started making real money for the first time, started building something of his own. He was 22 and figuring it out. We were all rooting for him. When he hurt his back, he was 23. I was 17. He was moving a heavy pallet, something slipped, and he threw out something in his lower back that required real medical attention. His doctor prescribed OxyContin, 30 pills, and then 30 more. And I would only understand years later how routine that was, how that prescription was being handed out across the country like it was ordinary, how the entire opioid crisis was being quietly assembled in exam rooms, just like the one my brother sat in. But I didn't know any of that at 17. I just knew that Darius, who had always been loud and present and filling up whatever room he occupied, was getting quieter, slower. He'd sit on the couch and just be still in a way he never had before, and from a distance it looked like rest, like peace, and it was something else entirely. 8 months in, my parents started noticing the money. Not dramatically, not a single theft you could point to and say, there, that's when the story changed. Small things first, always small things. $20 gone from my mother's purse, my dad's change jar emptied and then refilled halfway, as if Darius thought putting some of it back would make the missing half invisible. A gas card with $60 on it suddenly running dry. My mother would count her cash and recount it and try to remember if she'd spent it somewhere. She would give herself every possible alternative explanation because the actual explanation was not a place she was ready to go. My father did the same. They protected each other from the truth by protecting Darius from suspicion, and I watched it happen. And I was 17 and I didn't know what to say. When they finally confronted him, he cried in a way I had never heard him cry, not even at our grandfather's funeral. I was sitting in the upstairs hallway while they talked in the living room below, and I could hear him through the floor, and it was the sound of someone who was completely undone, and I believe completely that it was real, that his remorse in that moment was genuine and total. He told them he'd gotten into trouble with the pills, that he didn't know how it happened, that he was scared and ashamed and needed help. And my mother held him the way she used to hold us when we were sick as kids, making those low, rhythmic sounds. You're okay, we'll figure this out, we're not going anywhere. They put him in a 30-day residential program. It cost $12,000, pulled from savings they had been building for 15 years. He came out looking better, clearer in the eyes, steadier on his feet, present in a way he hadn't been for almost a year. He came to Sunday dinner 3 weeks after discharge and laughed his big laugh over the table, and I thought, okay, that was the storm. We made it through. We were nowhere near through. This is the part of the story that I think is hardest to explain to people who haven't lived it, because from the outside, what happened over the next several years looks like a series of bad decisions by everyone involved. My parents kept giving him chances. He kept relapsing. Aren't the bad decisions obvious? Why didn't you just stop? Here is what I want you to understand before you answer that question. Recovery is not linear. Relapse is not a character flaw. I know this now with my whole mind. I've read everything there is to read. I understand the neuroscience of what addiction does to the reward circuitry of the brain. I've sat across from therapists who have explained it in terms so clear they should be taught in every school. And understanding all of that does not make it one molecule easier to watch the person you love come home with that particular look on their face and know that everything is starting again. He relapsed 4 months after the first program, then again 8 months after that. Each time there was a conversation, there was crying, there was genuine remorse, there were promises that sounded true because they came from a person who meant them in the moment and had a disease that would override the meaning later. Each time my parents found more money, found more hope, repositioned themselves around the new information. A second program, a third, outpatient counseling, a therapist who specialized in addiction, an NA meeting commitment he kept for 2 months and then stopped keeping. By the time I was 19, he was using heroin. The pills had gotten too expensive. Someone in his world had done the economics and pointed him towards something cheaper that did the same job. And that is a sentence that should be on the wall of every congressional office that ever approved a prescription quota. But it doesn't help you when it's your brother. What helps you practically when it's your brother is none of the things that actually exist. What exists is that you start locking your bedroom door. You start keeping your laptop under your mattress. You learn to read the air in a room the way some people read weather. There's a specific quality of atmosphere in a house when Darius has used versus when he hasn't. Something in the temperature, in the way sound moves. You learn his particular tells, the half-second delay before answering, the way his eyes go to a fixed point on the wall when he's lying, the too careful way he moves through a kitchen like he's trying not to take up space. You learn all of this and you still love him. Both things exist at the same time and neither one cancels the other out. And that is the specific cruelty of the situation that I don't think people who haven't been in it fully appreciate. It's not a choice between loving him and protecting yourself. It's living in both states simultaneously, permanently, with no exit and no resolution, just the daily management of an emergency that never ends. I was commuting to college by then, living at home to save money because the savings were nearly gone. My mother had picked up extra shifts, my father had stopped having his friends over on weekends, a small thing that broke my heart every time I thought about it. The image of my father quietly shrinking his social world because he couldn't face the questions, couldn't stand the explaining, needed to protect the specific shame of having a son in the condition Darius was in. There was a moment when I was 21 that I've never talked about before this. I came home from a Thursday afternoon class to find Darius in my mother's bedroom closet. He didn't hear me come in. I stood in the doorway and watched him go through her things, her winter coats, the shoe boxes on the floor, the high shelf she used for things she considered important, with a focused, methodical efficiency that didn't look like him. It looked like someone operating machinery, someone using his hands and his body to complete a function while something important was somewhere else entirely. I said his name. He turned around, and what I saw on his face in that first unguarded second, before he pulled it back into something controllable, was the most frightening thing I have encountered in my life. Not violence, not aggression, absence. Complete and total absence, as if I were looking at my brother's face with no one inside it. One full second where he wasn't there at all. And then he was back, rearranged, apologetic, defensive. Why was I always watching him? He was just looking for something. Why did everyone in this house treat him like a suspect? He lived here too. I didn't tell my parents. I have turned that decision over many times in the year since. I think I was still holding on to something. The version of him that called me little bird, the person who ran alongside my bicycle with his arms out, and telling my parents felt like giving that version a funeral I wasn't ready to attend. So I covered for him. Not with a lie, exactly, with a silence. I participated in the same collective protection the whole family was engaged in, not out of naivety, but out of the specific human inability to accept that the person standing in front of you is not the person they used to be. I tell you this because I need you to know I wasn't righteous from the beginning. I wasn't the clear-eyed younger sister who saw everything and always made the right call. I was in it too. I was wrong too. And I think that matters when it comes to what I eventually did. I don't know exactly when Darius took the ring. What I know is that my mother called me on a Tuesday evening, voice careful and slightly too even, and said she couldn't find her jewelry box. She said she must have moved it somewhere and couldn't remember where. She said she'd been going through the house. I listened to her run through all the alternative explanations, the bathroom, the coat pocket. She'd taken it off before painting the hall bathroom 2 months ago. Maybe it was in that jacket. And I said, yes, probably. I'm sure it'll turn up. And I hung up and sat on my dorm room bed and stared at the wall. By Thursday, she knew. We all knew. Nobody said his name for almost 48 hours. There was a specific silence in the family that week that felt like pressure, like something atmospheric, like the stillness before a storm system moves in. When my father finally confronted Darius, the conversation went through several stages in about 20 minutes. First, denial, then the story about borrowing it to show a girl he was seeing, as if a wedding ring were the kind of thing you borrowed. Then the admission that he'd pawned it, but he could get it back. He just needed a couple $100 to redeem it. He swore he would go first thing Monday. Then the full collapse. The crying, the I'm sick, I know I'm sick, I don't know how to stop, I need help, please don't give up on me, I'm so sorry, please. My mother looked at her son. This woman who had worked extra shifts, who had sold jewelry of her own a year earlier to pay a bill she didn't tell me the details of, who had not slept properly in roughly 4 years, who had a tremor in her right hand that her doctor attributed to chronic stress, this woman looked at her son, who had taken the ring her husband put on her finger on their wedding day, and said, "Okay, we'll find a way to get you help again." I was standing in the kitchen doorway, and I heard those words come out of my mother's mouth, and something happened inside me that I can only describe as a snapping sound, interior, the specific sound of a thing that has been held under tension for too long, finally giving. Not anger, exactly, clarity. A brutal, unwelcome, completely undeniable clarity. I went to my room, I sat on my bed, I looked at the wall for a long time, and then I opened my laptop and I started reading. Okay, I need a second here. If you're still with me, and I know this is a lot, I know this is hard, please subscribe if you haven't. This story keeps going and it gets heavier before it gets lighter, and I need you to stay. And when you're done, please tell me in the comments where you're listening from, whether that's Manchester or Miami or somewhere you've never told anyone about because you're not sure they'd understand. I see you. I'm here. I spent that night reading everything I could find about addiction, family systems, enabling, intervention, and natural consequences. I read the clinical stuff, the studies about what actually produces lasting recovery, the data on outcomes for people who receive treatment through legal intervention versus people who receive it through family support systems. I read personal accounts from people in recovery talking about what finally broke through, what was different about the last time. And I read accounts from families who had done what I was beginning to understand I might need to do. The phrase that kept appearing in different forms across different sources was this: as long as the family absorbs the consequences, the addict doesn't have to face them. And the logical extension of that idea, followed to its end, was the thing my parents emotionally could not do: allowing consequences to be real, to hurt, even when the person getting hurt was someone they loved. I want to be precise about my emotional state while I was reading this, because I think the way it's often told makes it sound like revelation, like suddenly everything was clear and the path forward was obvious. It wasn't like that.
Reading those words felt like being handed a weapon I didn't want. It felt like grief with extra steps. Because I understood exactly what the practical application meant, I understood where the logic led, and it led to a place that made me feel sick even as I recognized it was probably true. I sat with that for 3 months. I am not exaggerating. 3 full months, during which I finished my college coursework, attended my graduation without telling my family about the applications I'd quietly submitted to graduate programs because it felt like planning a life raft, and I was ashamed of that, and watched my parents continue to absorb.
My father sold tools from his garage during those 3 months. Nice tools he'd collected over 20 years. He didn't tell me directly. I noticed the gaps on the pegboard wall when I visited, and he changed the subject when I mentioned it. My mother took a second job 2 evenings a week, cleaning an office building, coming home after 9 smelling like cleaning product with her feet hurting. She was 53 years old. She worked all day seeing patients and then cleaned offices at night. And she did it without complaint and without asking for acknowledgement. And it was the quiet, specific heroism of a parent who will not stop fighting for their child, even when their child is the thing they need to be fighting against. What broke my 3 months of waiting was a night in November. I came home late from the university library, grad school applications. I was finishing them, still hadn't told my family, and found the front door unlocked and the living room light on, which wasn't right. My parents were in bed by 10 as a rule. I came in and the downstairs was quiet, but not the ordinary quiet of an empty house. Something else. I found my mother sitting at the kitchen table in the near dark, just the small stove light on, not reading or looking at her phone or doing anything, just sitting. When I turned on the overhead light, she looked up at me, and she had been crying long enough that she was past it, just dry and flat and emptied out. I made tea. I sat across from her, and she told me, in a voice that scared me more than crying would have, what had happened. Darius had come by that evening. He'd knocked first, but they hadn't answered. They'd seen it was him through the window, and my father had made the decision not to open the door. A first, something that had taken him years to be able to do, and I knew how much it had cost him. Darius had gone around to the back of the house. He'd broken in through the basement window. My father had called the police. They'd come. And when the officers arrived and my father understood what it meant to give them his son's name, he couldn't do it. He'd said it was a misunderstanding. He'd sent them away. My mother told me this whole story in that flat, careful voice, and then she said, "I don't know what to do anymore, Maya. I have genuinely run out of knowing what to do." I put my hand over hers on the kitchen table, and I said, "I know." And I did. I had known for 3 months. I'd been waiting for a permission that was never going to come, because the people who would have given it were the same people who needed protection from what it would cost them. I understood that now in a way I hadn't before. I couldn't wait for permission. Permission wasn't available. Something else was going to have to be. I spent 11 days after that night making peace with what I was going to do. Not the decision itself. The decision had something like its own gravity, pulling me toward it whether I was ready or not. What I spent 11 days on was understanding it. I needed to know that I wasn't acting from anger. I wasn't. I needed to know I wasn't acting from exhaustion. I was exhausted, but that wasn't it either. I talked to a therapist, a new one, someone who didn't know my family, someone I could be completely honest with.
I called a helpline for families of people with addiction and spoke for nearly 2 hours with a counselor who had done this work for 30 years and who said things to me that I have carried since. I researched the specific jurisdiction, what an arrest for possession typically meant in terms of options, what programs existed, what a public defender could realistically negotiate. I did not want to do something irreversible without understanding what irreversible meant. I also spent 11 days saying goodbye to something. I'm not sure I have the language for exactly what it was. The version of the situation where things resolved on their own, maybe. The version where I didn't have to be the one. The version where my parents got to keep their image of their family intact, and also their son got better, and also nobody had to make the call that would break something permanently. I was grieving a future I'd been holding on to without realizing it, the future where we didn't have to cross this particular line. By day 11, I wasn't grieving anymore. I was ready.
I had information from someone in Darius's orbit I won't identify about where he would be on a Saturday afternoon. I sat in my apartment. I had my own place by then, just a studio, nothing much. And I dialed the non-emergency line, and then I stopped and I put the phone down, and I sat for about 20 minutes looking out my window at the street below. I watched a man walk a dog. I watched 2 kids on bikes go by. I watched the ordinary life of a Saturday afternoon happening without any awareness of what was occurring in my apartment on the 3rd floor. Then I picked up the phone and made the call. I told the dispatcher there was a person at a specific address in possession of controlled substances. I gave the address. I gave his name. I said he was my brother. I said I was worried about his safety. I said, please help him. Those last 3 words surprised me. I hadn't planned them, they just came out, and I think they were the truest thing I said in the whole 30-second call. I hung up, and I sat with my phone in my lap, and I shook from somewhere deep and central for a long time. I did not call my parents. I had thought hard about this. If I told them before, they would stop me. I knew this with complete certainty. If I told them after, they would have the option to intervene before anything was processed, to make calls, to ask someone to make it disappear. I was not going to put them in the position of choosing, because I knew what they would choose, and I knew, with everything I had read and thought and grieved over, that it was the wrong choice, even though I understood it at the atomic level. He was arrested that evening. I found out through a jail lookup site I had bookmarked several days earlier. I sat with that information alone for about an hour, then my father called. "Darius has been arrested," he said. "I know," I said. The silence that followed was one of the longest I've sat in. "Maya," my father said, my name in a way that contained about 6 different questions collapsed into 2 syllables. "Dad," I said, "I need you to listen to me." I told him everything, not defensively, not apologetically, not performing some version of confident certainty I didn't completely feel. I told him about the 11 days, the therapist, the counselor, the research, the night I'd found Mom at the kitchen table and what she said. I told him that I had loved his son every single day of this, that the love had never left, that the call I made was not an act of giving up, but the opposite, that I had made it because every other option had a known ending, and I could not accept that ending for our family or for Darius. I told him I was prepared for him to be angry, that I was prepared for a lot of things, but that I was not sorry.
He was quiet for a long time after I stopped talking. "You should have talked to us first," he said. "You would have stopped me," I said. Another silence, and then, "Yes, I would have." We didn't talk for 3 weeks after that call. My mother wouldn't come to the phone. I drove past the house twice during those weeks without stopping, sitting at the end of the street in my car like someone locked out of the one place they most wanted to be. Which was exactly what I was, in every sense that mattered. I need to tell you what happened to Darius. Not the version where the call fixes everything, because that's not the version that happened. County jail is not treatment. I want to be clear about that. He went through withdrawal in a county facility with limited medical support, and I heard about it secondhand from someone who'd been in the same unit, and I held that information and let it hurt me and did not let it make me pick up the phone and undo anything. Because I had done enough research to understand that supervised withdrawal in a difficult environment is survivable. What he'd been doing was not headed somewhere survivable. His public defender was good. That mattered. I want to acknowledge that because I know not everyone gets a good one, and the outcome of what I did was shaped in part by luck and circumstance that not everyone has access to. The DA's office in that county had a diversion track for drug offenses that pushed toward treatment rather than incarceration. His defender knew how to navigate it. The judge, who had apparently seen enough of these cases to understand what served the actual goal, signed an order for mandatory residential treatment, 18 months, a real program, structured and sustained in a way that 30 days never was and never could be. He went to a facility in central Pennsylvania. My parents began visiting monthly about 6 weeks in, after a counselor at the facility spoke with them about what the treatment process actually looked like, what would help and what wouldn't. My father told me about that conversation later, what the counselor had said about family systems, about the difference between supporting recovery and preventing consequences. He didn't say the word enabling. He didn't need to. I heard it in everything he left out. I visited once, on my own, about 3 months into Darius's program. 2 hours there, 2 hours back. A Tuesday I'd cleared specifically so I wouldn't have to rush. The facility was a low brick building set back from a state road, functional rather than institutional, surrounded by enough open space to feel less like confinement than it might have otherwise. I signed in at the front desk and waited in a room with uncomfortable chairs and a television showing a cooking show with the volume low, and then he came through the door. He looked terrible and better at the same time. That's the truest description I have. Thinner, older in the face by more years than the calendar explained, but there was something in his eyes that had been missing for so long I'd almost forgotten it was supposed to be there. A quality of presence, of actually being in the room that the drugs had been steadily erasing for years. It wasn't strong yet. It was like a pilot light trying to catch in a wind, but it was there. He sat down across from me and looked at me for a long moment without speaking. Then he said, "I know you know." I said, "I know you know." He nodded slowly. He looked at the table between us. He said, "I'm not ready to say thank you." I said, "You don't have to." We sat in that for a while, the two of us, in a room that smelled like industrial cleaner and the ghost of someone's lunch. And then, the way water finds its level, we found our way to small things. He asked about school, about my apartment, about a friend of mine he'd always liked. I asked about the program, about the people he'd met, about whether the food was as bad as it looked. We talked for about an hour and 15 minutes, and it was almost normal. It was almost like two people who used to know each other well, beginning to find their way back to a common language. When visiting hours ended, we stood at the door of the room and he hugged me. He's taller than me, always has been, so my face went against his shoulder, and he held on for longer than I expected. And with his face turned away from mine, quietly enough that I almost didn't catch it, he said, "Little bird." I held that completely together for the 2-hour drive home, and then I pulled into a rest stop off the turnpike and sat in the parking lot and cried until there was nothing left in me. And then I drove the rest of the way home and went to bed and slept for 10 hours without dreaming.
My parents came back to me slowly, in the way that real forgiveness happens. Not as an event, not as a conversation, but as a series of small moments accumulating into something that starts to feel like before, even if it's never exactly before again. My father called me about a month after the arrest. He didn't apologize in words, that's not how he was built. He said, "I've been thinking." He said he'd spoken to the counselor at Darius's facility who had said something about family systems that my father had been sitting with. He told me what the counselor had said, and I recognized the ideas. I'd read the same things during my 11 days of research. My father didn't say I was right. He said, "I understand more now than I did." For a man who had been raised to keep his cards close and his errors private, that statement cost him something real. I knew it. I received it as what it was. My mother was longer. About 2 months after the arrest, she drove to my apartment on a Wednesday afternoon without calling first. I opened the door and she was standing there, and she started crying before she even came inside. I brought her in, made tea the way she'd always made it for me, specific ratio, specific time, the kind of thing you absorb from a parent without noticing. And we sat across from each other in my small living room, and she cried without talking for a while, which she almost never did. And eventually she said, "I keep thinking about that ring." I waited. "I keep thinking I would have given it away myself," she said. "If someone had told me, if someone could have promised me that this is where it leads, that this is what it takes, I would have taken it off my own finger and handed it over." I didn't say anything. I put my hand over hers. She looked at the table and said, half to herself, the way you say something when you've been arguing with it for a long time and finally run out of fight, "You were right." She did not say, "I'm glad you did it." She didn't go that far. But she said that, and it was enough, and I will carry it for the rest of my life. Recovery is not a destination. I know this with my full self. I know there is no version of this story that ends with everything guaranteed, because that guarantee doesn't exist for anyone in recovery, not ever. He could relapse. The research says he might. And if he does, that will be a new situation requiring its own response, and our family will navigate it with whatever we've learned from having navigated this. But the trajectory is different now than it was. That much is real. There is one more thing. About 8 months after Darius started his program, my father gave my mother a new ring. He didn't make a production of it, that's not who my father is. He just came home a Tuesday evening, and after dinner, while they were still at the table, he took a small box out of his shirt pocket and put it in front of her. Simple gold band, nothing elaborate. She opened the box and looked at it for a moment, and then looked at him. He said, "I should have done this sooner." She told me about it over the phone, and even telling it, she started crying, and I started crying on my end, and we stayed on the line, not saying much for a few minutes, just being connected. She wears it every day. I'm Maya. I started this channel because I needed somewhere to put the things I didn't know how to say in the rest of my life, and somewhere along the way, people started finding it who needed the same thing. If this story is yours, if you have someone, if you are someone, if you're sitting somewhere right now recognizing yourself in any part of what I've described, I need you to know that I see you, and I know how heavy it is, and I know that love and limits do not have to be opposites, even when every feeling in your body is telling you they are. You can love someone with your whole heart and still say, "Not like this, not anymore." Those two things can live in the same sentence,
I promise you they can. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from, and please share this if someone in your life needs to hear it. Not because I need the reach, but because somewhere there is a person sitting on a kitchen floor in the dark, holding an empty box, and they need to know that what they're feeling is real and what they're considering is survivable, and they are not, in any version of this story, alone. They never were.